Hello, and welcome to Lopes on Movies. My name is Joey Lopes, and today I am joined by Mark.
Hello.
And
I'm usually second.
well, I wanted to change it up this week. I never want to do the exact same thing every episode. Like if you notice, I kind of change the way I say the intro, even if I say the same words.
You caught me off guard.
Yeah, sometimes it gets a little weird. Connor's here too, by the way.
Hi.
What are you not? You're not a fan of this banter?
No, I was just like, you could have just introduced me sooner.
I'm sorry.
But
I didn't want to give the impression that you were less important by waiting to introduce you. Everybody on this show matters equally. We love everybody here, and we love you listening to it as well. We definitely want to make sure to communicate that very clearly. We love
our listener.
Whoever's listening, we love you, and keep doing it.
Yes.
Well, guys, we're here for yet another episode of our David Lynch retrospective, Lynchtober, as you guys so irritatingly named it. And this one, guys, this one's going to be this is going to be an interesting episode. I think
This is an interesting one.
So the two movies that we watched are The Straight Story and Wild at Heart. So these are two movies that David Lynch made in the 90s. Now, what we were doing before this episode was kind of going in chronological order of things that David Lynch made in movies he directed. So we did starting with Eraserhead, then The Elephant Man, then we went to Blue Velvet. We skipped Dune because he wouldn't want us to watch Dune anyway. And now we're going into just kind of checking off the boxes of movies that we haven't seen from David Lynch. So Wild at Heart came out in, I believe, 1990, and The Straight Story came out in 1999. So there's a good distance between these two movies, and he did a couple of things in between, like Lost Highway, for example, which we're not going to talk about during this retrospective, but let me be very clear that everybody owes it to themselves to watch Lost Highway at some point.
It's amazing. Yeah, definitely check that one out.
So just so you know, we're kind of breaking our chronological thing. And in the spirit of that, for various reasons, we felt like it would make more sense to talk about The Straight Story first on this episode rather than continuing in sort of chronological order. So, Connor, how about you give us a synopsis of The Straight Story?
Sure thing. And if you do remember, in the archive of our show, there was once a little segment that I did. Remember, Joey?
This is one of your patented old man movies.
It is. This was one of Connor's top 7 or 6.
You forgot,
or
Joey?
something.
Oh, man.
I forgot about that.
The Straight Story was one of my top old man movies, and we will get into why this is an old man movie.
Oh, yes.
All right, The Straight Story. An old man makes a long journey by lawnmower to mend his relationship with an ill brother. It stars Richard Farnsworth, Sissy Spacek, and those are the main ones, along with a bunch of other Lynch regulars that pop in here and there. And Joey. Or Mark, what did you think of The Straight Story?
What, am I not good enough for you?
Well, no, I was like, you already talked a bunch, and I'm like, you know what, and then you snubbed me by like letting it go on and on forever. So
yeah, I guess
fair enough. Let's
took
go,
it away
Mark.
from you. All right, so I think this is the first old man movie I've watched in quite a while.
Talking about this as if it's a real genre.
This is a genre,
but it's like this is a deeply emotional movie. Like. I didn't expect it going in, especially because it was produced by Disney. But I would not call this like saccharine or even like particularly happy. It's a deeply melancholy movie about age and about like wisdom and about like a lot of people in this almost forgotten part of America that have like just these really real struggles, and apparently it's based on a true story, so that part does make sense. Just to be clear and reiterate, this is about an old man who's extremely stubborn, but he's like a wise, sweet old guy, but he's set in his ways, and if he sets his mind to something, he's gonna do it. And that includes when he decides to drive himself across state lines to his brother's place on his lawnmower, because he doesn't have a driver's license. and it's just like, I don't know, it's just really touching. Like, this is a very, like, I don't know, it gets at you. Especially, I think, because it's like the movies that we put into this fake genre are kind of like a last hurrah, even for the people themselves. Like, the actual actor,
Richard Farnsworth, yeah.
Yeah, he was suffering from like terminal cancer during filming this, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And died shortly after this had finished, like in 2000.
Yeah, it was like a year later. He actually committed suicide,
yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, it was because of his terminal cancer, though. So it's like really, I don't know.
There's
like,
definitely
you feel this deeply.
There's a sense of melancholy to it. There's a sense of regret. There's a really kind of subtly torturous scene where he kind of meets up with these bikers. Like, I say bikers, I mean people riding bikes, like it's triathlon or something, right?
Yeah,
and they're all
it's like a bunch of.
They're all camping out somewhere after this leg of the race, and he kind of meets up with them, and they're like young in their 20s, whatever. And one of the guys just like asks him, like, so what's the worst thing about being old? And he says, like, the worst thing about being old is remembering when you were young, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
it's like,
so rough.
and just everybody is just like silent after
they just
that.
stop.
It's because, like, what can you what do you say? There's nothing that can make that feel
into
better.
A joke, or
like,
it's like just real.
It's just a reality of life that we have to deal with, I guess, that we get older and we don't get younger. And I think the movie does a great job earning all of its like drama and emotional moments, because it really is a very subtle story. The basic structure of it is, he discovers that his brother had a stroke, I believe, and we don't get a lot of details about his relationship with his brother, but we know that like 10, 15 years ago, something like that, they had a falling out. They had an argument, I believe they say, or something like that. They said things to each other that they regret, and they haven't talked in 15 years. But after Alvin, who is the main character, hears that his brother had a stroke, he feels, in his old age, coming to terms with this, he needs to reach out to him, he needs to get there, and he needs to do it on his own terms, right? So that's what kind of inspires him to go on this ridiculous cross-country journey. So that's the setup for everything. And then the rest of the movie is really just these kind of series of vignettes of him running into people along the way, and telling stories about his life and kind of how that relates to the lives of the people that he meets. And it's all very much like, I guess it's very folksy, like the one thing that I think I went into this movie thinking, and I don't know if this is just because what I've heard from the internet and from knowing about the movie, that this is very different for David Lynch, right? Like, it's not surreal, really. There's nothing about it that is hard to follow or deliberately obtuse. And it's just a very simple story of, a real situation, basically. And
I wouldn't call it a bad thing, but I would say that most of the filmmaking side of this is very like normal. It's not like you said, it's not in the vein of some of his other work.
You could say that.
It's much more direct.
There's one thing I want to say that really kind of struck me very quickly, because knowing that the movie's apparently different from things David Lynch has done, I was really surprised to feel like the opening of it was very reminiscent of Blue Velvet in a weird way, where we get these kinds of like very dreamlike dissolves over like middle America and this kind of beautiful interpretation of like suburban America and everything, right? And it is a little surreal in that we have these really long dissolves. We get these like kind of like, it's like there's like a helicopter shot showing this machinery in a field that recurs a lot in the movie. And I thought that was interesting. Now, of course, in Blue Velvet, like the camera goes from these idyllic images of suburban America and then tracks very deep into the grass and then reveals these like hideous bugs lurking underneath, right? Which is like the very obvious metaphor of saying like, there's this idyllic surface and then underneath there's a lot of shady stuff going on. But in the straight story, we never get that far, right? Like the camera never gets into the grass. It stays on the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the difference being that if Blue Velvet is about the seedy underbelly of suburban America, then the straight story is about the surface, which actually does have some pretty wonderful and very human things going on, right? And I think that's when it kind of clicked for me. It's like, this really isn't that different from the more like folksy elements of David Lynch's work, right? Like I was reminded a lot of Twin Peaks in like, because if you think about the moments of Twin Peaks that are devoid of mystery and devoid of like violence and suspense, a lot of it is very much like these, it's about the humanity of the characters, the community of Twin Peaks, the very specific local color in the area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And David Lynch has always been great at that and creating this like very like wonderful sense of community. And that's really what this movie is about.
This one, absolutely, because there's a ton of like, I actually didn't, I saw this one a while ago and I was familiar with, I talked about this one before, but there's a lot of characters in this movie. You don't get them for a long time, but it feels like they're very fleshed out and they've lived in this world.
Impactful.
They're very impactful. And, I think Richard Farnsworth just does like such a phenomenal job in this too, because he's in basically every scene. It is like his movie, and he was nominated for an Oscar for this too.
Yeah, he was.
It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, like, there are characters that are only in one scene, and like they're very memorable. Like they have like so much life in them. Especially like I love his friends in his first town.
Oh yeah,
they're like
great.
Just all these like old guys who are like like just keeping an eye on him and stuff. and especially the store scene is just amazing. The grabber scene is incredible.
I've rewatched that scene like 100 times since.
What you need a grabber for, Alvin?
Grabbing. Oh my god! Like it's just like the performance of the shopkeeper too. Is like that's like a vintage David Lynch character.
That character is absolutely very heavy in that.
But it's so
I think
good.
It's worth stating Alvin, like, obviously he got, like, did he win or get nominated? But,
nominated, yeah.
Like, the like, performance he turns in, like, you can see on his face, almost through the entire movie, just, like, this underlying worry of all of it, because he's obviously wondering if he's going to be too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just, like, it kind of hurts, but it's really good.
It's deeply emotional.
And I think that's kind of wild about it too is that this was his last film, obviously, and he was ill while filming it. But he was like a career actor who just he was always around, but he never really he never made it as like had like a big part. Like this was his first like major role too.
Sure.
And he was excellent at it. But if you look at if you go on IMDb and looked up Richard Farnsworth, he's been around doing TV and movies. Forever.
Yeah, he was like a stuntman, and like he didn't even really become a like proper actor, as far as I could tell, looking at his biography, until his like 40s or so. Like he was working since he was 16 on movies. He was just turning it in and like getting his stuff done, and like it's kind of incredible because he's like really, really good in this movie.
Yeah. Makes you wonder, like, how much of it is acting, Like, obviously, he's reading lines, but there's so much to that character that feels so real. And if you, like, listen to interviews with Richard Farnsworth, like, he seems like just such a sweet guy, like, around the time when the movie came out. And, like, I feel like he responded pretty well to this character, and it ended up looking so effortless as a result. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys really want to talk too much more about The Straight Story, because we do have another interesting movie to get to here.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I mean, the overall, like, I think this might be the easiest David Lynch movie to recommend to anybody, because it's just a very well done emotional piece of work that I think has a story that could easily resonate with everybody, easily understandable, nothing crazy about it. And it's very sweet, and I think at the end, you have it's a bittersweet feeling, but I think it's something that that'll stick with you,
Yeah,
and it
somewhat
earns it,
unlike our maybe not in the like in a bad sense, but definitely in the recommendable sense, unlike our next movie as far as accessibility is concerned. I'd say the only thing these two movies really have in common is that they're road movies.
Yeah, that's
it's
a good
amazing
point.
how little there is in common between these two, other than being about a journey.
Yeah, that's I guess let's just jump into Wild at Heart then. So Connor, how about you? You did the first one. Do it. Give us another synopsis here. Give us Wild at Heart.
All right.
Sure thing. Wild at Heart, from 1990. So Wild at Heart came out while people were already pretty familiar with David Lynch at this point, because obviously his other films that we covered, The Elephant Man, Eraserhead, and Dune also came out.
Blue Velvet,
and
Twin Peaks, all that.
Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks also came out too at
Yep.
that point. So people were very familiar with David Lynch. So that I think that's a good point to maybe have.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe get into. So here's the synopsis. Young lovers Sailor and Lula run from a variety of weirdos that Lula's mom has hired to kill Sailor. It stars everyone's favorite Nicolas Cage as Sailor and
So good.
Laura Dern as Lula. Which
Also really good.
which one is something this movie meant a whole lot to David Lynch because he has his youngest daughter's name is Lula, which I have to imagine was named from this movie.
Yeah, maybe.
Joey, how about you this time?
Okay.
Let's let you try to the transition from Wild at Heart, to Wild at Heart from the straight story. Because this is a very straight story too.
Well, God, Wild at Heart is, like David Lynch has made a lot of crazy movies. There's nothing like unusual about watching a David Lynch movie and feeling like, that was kind of crazy. But Wild at Heart is a oh my God,
it's wild.
It is wild. I came away from it thinking that it might be the most uneven of Lynch's movies that I've seen. Because the whole thing is basically a violent, sex-fueled, manic fever dream. And it has moments of extreme violence, moments of extreme weirdness and comedy, and it kind of just goes back and forth between these things. And then it also
just shifting gears
like on a dime, right? And it also sometimes it tries to do these things once, and then there's these moments that are like very like dark and like tragic and emotional, and then there is this central love story that is very earnest, and you could argue is endearing, even though these characters are completely ludicrous. But
they're lunatics. Yeah,
the movie is like so unhinged and ridiculous that I found it really hard to take seriously a lot of the time. Not in a bad way, but like it's just that it's so crazy, and you're gonna have a good time, or maybe you won't. Like it's you're gonna have a time with it no matter what. It's gonna be something that you're never gonna forget. But whether or not it's an experience that at the end of the day you think was like completely valuable or completely coherent and good, that's gonna vary from person to person. I could see this being people's favorite movie and being people's least favorite movie.
Really, I think I enjoyed it. I mean, like I could see it appealing to a certain crowd a whole lot. It's very goofy for the most part, but then it has some very, very serious elements. Like a lot of stuff that happens to Laura Dern is just not funny in the slightest.
And it's wild, it's like how it
really messed up actually.
From like that kind of stuff to the wackiest things on the planet.
Like crazy things. I think like it obviously centers around this relationship between Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern. And I think for the most part their on-screen chemistry is pretty good.
They definitely seem like they're made for each other.
It's an odd couple, but like it actually works. And I there's like this sense of like poor Lula just has like no good people in her life whatsoever, men or women, especially her mom. And like Sailor is this like earnest, roguish kind of guy who's like a really, really good guy, both surface level and at his heart. He's like just like a good dude. And he's like, he knows he's the coolest thing around. Whether or not that's true is her argument. But he certainly acts like he's the coolest guy to ever live.
Yes.
And it's very entertaining to watch him on screen. Nick Cage is just like a lunatic.
I mean, this is vintage Nick Cage.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Like, if you like Nick Cage, you have to watch this.
Yeah, I think that's required reading for sure.
If I had to just while we're on Nick Cage, if I had to like it's funny that remember I like the last show I brought up how Lynch talked about Elvis, right? He brought up the
yeah.
Heartbreak Hotel, and then
Mhm.
he talks about Elvis. So Lynch loves Elvis, and Nick Cage's character is kind of like a modern day Elvis-y kind of guy.
Mhm.
And there's even like Elvis songs in the film,
That he
which
sings.
are which are
Yeah.
that he said. Yeah, so I mean, spoiler, but like Nick Cage sings in this, and he's great, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's awesome. Those scenes are fantastic. There's a lot of like little. There's really good stuff with the music in this too, which it
Mhm.
and there's so many different genres of music in this also, which is another thing that
Yeah.
just adds to the maddening nature of it, which I think really worked. I love this, but
It jumps from like blues to hard rock to like
heavy
it's
metal,
just-
yeah.
heavy metal,
Yeah.
crazy dancing
Oh, man.
scenes.
Yeah.
But you are right. Like the main like central relationship is definitely with Nick Cage and Laura Dern, who I think have extremely great chemistry as two just like immature kind of like still like young figuring it out people that are just trying to
Mhm.
make it, and they're just caught up in a really bad situation. There's
And they're
also
both
the
kind of lunatics.
Yeah.
well, everybody in this movie is
Yeah,
kind of
everybody in the world is a
crazy.
lunatic in this.
even
in this
Yeah.
world, I guess,
exactly even the people that are like normal-ish, like the cast in this is also just great, and there's so many of the David Lynch regulars in this are
Even
in it
Harry
too.
Dean Stanton.
Right, I
has
was
his
going to bring up
moments
Harry
of
Dean
unhinged.
Stanton. Even he's a bit off, you know.
There's
Like
a part where he's like barking at the TV
Oh,
or
I love that
something.
scene.
yeah, like everybody is like not quite there, and there's a lot of the
It's
Twin Peaks
amazing.
actors in this. How about Sarah Palmer, Grace Zabriskie?
I was
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
mention that this is her first role with Lynch, and she plays like the.
Oh, I
the
mean,
good
I don't
witch.
know. There is some wild characters in this.
Oh wait, Sarah Palmer. I'm sorry, I meant Laura Palmer.
Well,
Cheryl
her too.
Lee.
Yeah,
This
Cheryl
is her
Lee was in
first
it, yeah.
role with Lynch, and she has a cameo at the end of the movie. Well, I guess at this point it's actually more like a bit part because she wasn't a real like known commodity before this, or maybe it's like really close.
Twin Peaks was
Kinda.
out by this point, so she was
Twin
in
Peaks
that.
was. Mhm.
It's like okay, so it came out like almost simultaneously.
Yeah,
and
pretty
she's
close.
like the good witch in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
it's
oh my God, that's-
bizarre.
Yeah, but Grace Zabriskie, who plays Sarah Palmer, Laura Palmer's mother in Twin Peaks, she's
Mhm.
also in this as I guess a hitman. I don't know exactly what her role
she's
in this
incredible.
She's like a
scenario was.
torturous person,
Yeah,
like a dominatrix
She's like the-
kind of
Yeah, a
thing. I
little
don't know
bit.
what that is. Like,
Yeah.
it's wild.
She's like the cleaner or something after like the hitman whisks. It's the hitmen in this movie are incredible.
Yeah,
They're like
there's something about
so messed up. There's like so many screws loose in their heads, and it's very entertaining to watch them. Like they're not the kind of hitmen you might imagine when you think of like trained assassin. They're more like cartoon characters.
They are cartoon
but
characters,
in a
yes.
deranged,
Yeah.
lunatic, evil torturer sort of way. It's something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you watch this movie with just kind of like every scene, you're just like I don't know how this could possibly get any crazier than it does.
Well, not only that, it also sets the tone like in the first
the
like
very
30
first
seconds.
Scene, yeah, the very first scene is
So-
like, here you go, guys. This is what this movie's
Yeah.
gonna be.
Normal for like 5 seconds, and then that
Just
happens.
instant, like on a dime. Extreme violence from our hero.
Who still manages to be likable through the rest of the movie. So.
Yeah, it's a very very strange thing. I feel like there's a slight detachment that you have between like yourself, like watching the main characters. Like you're not
Mhm.
like gonna identify with them in any like I don't know traditional
It's total
way.
opposite of
Yeah.
the straight story.
Right,
You're not
yeah.
emphasizing with anybody in
Yeah,
this
like
movie, really.
I think
Except maybe Lula.
yeah, you can empathize with Lula, but even then, like she's kind of crazy too. And I feel like
She's a
like
yeah.
you could argue like that Sailor's not good enough for her. Like that's something that I'm sure that people could come away from. But I really think they belong together. Yeah,
They seem like such a good match, and he's like so much like it. I don't know if this is like the right reading, but it looks like she feels safe with him,
Mhm.
which is something that is not happening explicitly with almost every other
Yeah.
man in her life, especially.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like kind of like that's the emotional core, if anything, of the movie, of her like abusive relationships in the past and present, and it's like you want them to end up together because of like him fighting so hard.
I mean, their relationship
like,
is very earnest and sweet.
Yeah.
You know.
It is. It's just that her mother, who is her actual mother in real life, Diane Ladd, just hates him.
Yeah.
Yep. She just decided it.
Well,
it's
to
like
be
For
fair,
very- no, not
there's
exactly.
a
There's-
reason why
there's reasons.
she suspects or doesn't quite like Sailor, but
yeah.
it's without getting into too much detail. There's plot reasons for it, but the that you know. You think back on this
It's an
movie.
interesting
and it's like,
movie.
The scenes pop into your head, and you're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe when that happened." Like, remember when Willem Dafoe was introduced? What was going on? What was going on in that that motel or whatever it was when Willem Dafoe first came on screen?
When he's taking the phone call.
No, when they're like at I don't know, they're just like sitting around the motel in what is it, Big Tuna, Texas.
It reminded me of the.
Right.
It reminded me of like the introductory scene of Nocturnal Animals.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if
Oh,
Nocturnal
yep,
Animals
I
was
know
almost
it.
inspired by.
It could be
by that.
It could be. Yeah.
Not impossible.
Yeah.
Jack Nance is really good in that little bit.
Oh yes, he is. Yes, he is. Good to see.
Actually,
yeah.
there was some really interesting edits that reminded me. There's a lot of cutaways in this movie. Some of them make more sense than others. It's usually characters remembering things, but like it's a really interesting use of that. Just like tons of cutaways to the past of like a certain fire that happened in the past of both of the characters.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
fire
just,
is a
like,
huge thing in
really-
this too. Fire is everywhere in this, and fire is a good thing and a bad thing. Or it's kind of like
Yeah.
it causes so much harm, but they can't escape it too. Like whenever they both smoke cigarettes, when they're smoking a cigarette, it zooms up on
Cuts
the
to
cigarette and
that.
it zooms up
Yeah.
on the flame, you know.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
also
passion.
fire is a big aspect of like a lot of harm that happens in the movie too. Yeah.
Everybody, definitely watch The Straight Story because that's for everybody, and maybe Google Wild at Heart
Or watch it
and see if
watch
it's for
it if you want.
Yeah, I don't want to recommend something that's going to traumatize people.
If you like Nick Cage, you gotta.
If you like Nick Cage, you gotta
You're
watch it.
already traumatized.
If you like
Nick Cage,
If you like the Gonzo Nick Cage stuff, you'll like this, and it's a good precursor to the things that he does later, except that they become a little better. Like, they're told better, you know. Like I do see similarities of how this led to Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, and
sure.
even Twin Peaks: The Return,
Oh,
especially.
I thought you were talking about Nick Cage for a second. There.
Oh no,
Nick
no,
Cage
no!
gets way worse.
I mean Lynch. Like you could definitely see the same kind of stuff, like a character, Mr. Reindeer, Mr. Strawberry, like you know, like
I
just
can't think about Mr. Reindeer right now. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.